first thing to do is accept. And once you've accepted, this is a gravity problem, I can't change it. You know, this is a company, and the company is a family-run company, and the name of the founder is on the door, and if you're not in the family, you can't be the president. You're right, you can't. So now you have to decide, what do you want to do? Is that a circumstance that you can reframe and work in, or do you need to do something else? So be really careful about gravity problems, because they're pernicious, and they really get in the way. But back to this idea of multiples. I do a little thought experiment with my students. And I say, you know, the physicists up at SLAC have kind of demonstrated that this multiverse thing might be real. You've heard of this, right? That there are multiple parallel universes, one right next to each other. And I said, you know, we'll do a thought experiment. Let's say you could live in all the multiverses simultaneously. And not only that, but you would know about your life in each one of these instances. So you could go back and be the ballerina, and the scientist, and the CPA, and whatever else you want it to be. You could have all these lives in parallel. When I ask them, how many lives are you? How many lives would you want? I get answers from 3 to 10,000. But, you know, we've sort of done the average. It's about 7.5. Most people think they have about 7.5 really good lives that they could live. And here's the deal, you only get one. But it turns out it's not what you don't choose, it's what you choose in life that makes you happy. Nevertheless, we reframe this and we say, great, there's more lives than one in you. So let's go on an odyssey and let's really figure out those lives. And we ask people to do some design. In the ideate bubble, it's about having lots of ideas. So we say, let's have some ideas. We're going to ideate your future, but you can't ideate just one, you have to ideate 3. Now, there's some research from the School of Education that says if you start with 3 ideas and you brainstorm from there, you get a wider range of ideas. The ideas are more generative, and they lead to better solutions to the problem rather than just starting with 1 and then brainstorming forward. So we always do 3s. There's something magical about 3s. We have people do 3 lives, and it's transformational. We give them this little rubric. 1, the thing you're doing, the thing you're doing right now, whatever your career is, just do it. And you're going to do it for 5 years, and it's going to come out great. So, I mean, in design, we're sort of values neutral, except for one thing. We never design anything to make it worse, right? I have been on some teams that made some pretty bad products, but we weren't trying to. We were trying to make it better. So thing 1, your life, make it better. And also put in the bucket list stuff. You want to go to Paris, want to go to the Galapagos before the guy with the ice thing, before it's all underwater and we can't see it anymore. So that's plan 1. Your life now goes great. Plan 2, I'm really sorry to tell you, but the robots and the AI stuff, that job doesn't exist anymore. The robots are doing it. We don't need you to do that anymore. Now what are you going to do? So what do you do if the thing that you've got goes away? And everybody's got a side hustle or something that they can do to make that work. And 3 is, what's your wildcard plan? What'd you do if you didn't have to worry about money? You got enough. You're not fabulously wealthy, but you got enough. And what would you do if you knew no one would laugh? My students come into my office hours a lot of times and they'll say something like, well, what I really want to do is this, but I can just hear people saying, you didn't go to Stanford to do that, did you? Right? Because somehow or other, if you went to Stanford, you have to do some of the amazing things that the past speakers have been doing. But what would you do if you had enough money and you didn't care what people thought? Anything from, I'm going to go study butterflies to I want to be a bartender, in Belize. What would you do? And people have those 3 plans. Now, what happens when they do this is 1, they realize, oh my gosh, I could actually have imagined 3 completely parallel lives. They're all pretty interesting. 2, they rarely go become a bartender, in Belize. But a lot of times, the things that come up on the other plans were things that they left behind somehow. In the busyness of life, they forgot about those things. And so they bring them back and they put them in plan 1. They make their lives even better. Sometimes they do pivot. But mostly they just use this as a method of ideating all the possible wonderful ways they could have a life. Now, you could start executing that. But in our model, the thing you do after you have ideas is you build a prototype. We have met people who've quit their job and suddenly done something else. It hardly ever works. You kind of have to sneak up on it because in our model, we want to set the bar really low, try stuff, have some success, and do it again. So when we say prototype in our language, what we mean is a way to ask an interesting question. What would it be like if I tried this? A way to expose the assumptions. Is this even the thing I want? Or is that just something I remember I wanted when I was 20? I got to go out in the world and do this, so I'm going to get others involved in prototyping my life. And I'm going to sneak up on the future, because I don't know if this is exactly what I want. The 2 kinds of life design prototypes, one we call a prototype conversation. William Gibson, the science fiction writer, has a famous quote, "The future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed." So there is someone who's a bartender in Ibiza. He's been doing it for years. I could go meet him and have a conversation, he or she. Somebody else is doing something else I'm interested in. All these people are out there. They're living in my future today. They're doing what I want to do today. And if I have a conversation with them, I just ask for their story, and everybody will tell you their story if you buy them a cup of coffee. They'll tell you the story, and if I hear something in the story that rings in me, we have this thing we call narrative resonance. When I hear a story that's kind of like my story, something happens. And I can identify that as a potential way of moving forward. The other one is a prototype experience. I was working with, Dave and I were working with a woman, sort of mid-career in her 40s, and very successful tech executive, but wanted to move from money-making to meaning-making, wanted to do something more meaningful. Thinking of going back to school, getting an MA in education, working with kids. But she's like, I don't know, I'm 45, going back to school, is that gonna work? And then I heard about these millennials, they're kind of mean, and they don't like old people. What am I gonna do, Bill? I said, well, you just have to go try this, Turns out, so we sent her to a seminar class, into a large lecture hall class. By the way, you just put on a t-shirt that says Stanford, you walk into a class, nobody knows. She wasn't registered, but everybody, she went to the classes, and she came back and she said, you know what, it was fantastic. I walked into the lecture hall, I sat down, my body was on fire. It was interesting. I'm so interested in the way the lecture was going. And then I met these millennials that turned out, they're pretty interesting people. I've set up 3 prototype conversations, and they think I'm interesting because I'm coming back to school and I'm 45. So she had a felt experience, because we are more than just our brains. She had a felt experience that this might work for her. So those are 2 ways you could prototype your way forward. The last idea, you want to make a good decision well. So many people make choices and they're not happy with their choices because they don't really know, how do they know what they know, right? It's a hard thing, particularly nowadays when we have so many choices. So we have a process. Again, it comes from the positive psychology guys. Gather and create options. Once you get good at design, you're really good at coming up with lots of options. You got to narrow those down to the working list that you can work with. Then you make the choice, you make a good choice, and then of course you agonize that you did the wrong thing. All my students have what is called FOMO, fear of missing out. What if I didn't pick the right thing? Someone came into my office and said, I'm going to declare 3 majors and 2 minors. And I said, do you plan on being here for a few years? It's not going to happen, right? So we don't say that. We say, you want to let go and move on. And all these have some psychological basis in them. Let me tell you about it. So once you get good at gathering and creating ideas, you also want to make sure you leave room for the lucky ideas, the serendipitous ideas. And this is a guy named Tony Hsieh. He was the CEO at Zappos. He sold it to Amazon. But he had before you became an employee at Zappos, you had to take a test, and the test was, are you lucky? 1, 2, or 3, I'm not very lucky, I'm not sure why. 7, 8, 9, 10, I'm very lucky, great things happen to me all the time.